right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first AMSCI and Eurometal steel trade webinar. I'm very happy that finally we got this first webinar together, and this will be one of many to come. And we are actually even planning to have it on a quarterly basis. My name is Alexander Julius. I'm in the presidency of EUROMETAL and managing director of a German-based trading company, Macrometal. I'm very happy that all of you can make it today. And as you can imagine, we also slightly altered the program of today in view of the latest developments in the Ukraine and Russia. To this effect, we are also welcoming at a later stage Alexander Sirik. We will do the introduction one after the other, but he will also be able to tell us some more about the situation there. And this affecting, of course, the global steel markets will be also one issue on the agenda. Let me introduce, first of all, the panelists that are coming from the European side, because as I indicated to you, we have panelists then that are coming from the European and from the United States side. So we will today start actually with on our side with Fabrizio Di Gianni. Fabrizio Di Gianni is a lawyer based in Brussels. He has international experience in the EU and the EU law and actually trade law, and has been active in this respect for a Brussels-based law firm for many years. And on top of that, we have Jean-Luc Helsmoortel. He is coming from the port of Antwerp, and he will tell us a little bit more about the traffic and the logistics related issues of the safeguards and also further topics to come. My colleague, Richard Chris from the United States, and I pass it on to you now, Richard, is going to say something about the American side.
Thank you, Alexander, and hello to all. The organization I am privileged to lead as president, the American Metals Supply Chain Institute, formerly AIIS, has a long history, over 70 years of advocating for free trade in steel and now in all metals, and also for enhancing the effectiveness and the efficiency of the entire metal supply chain. Our efforts are primarily focused on education and serving as a forum for professional development, providing opportunities for interaction and networking for our members, and advocacy both in Washington, D.C. and other venues. We see this joint webinar with our great partner, EUROMETAL, as the first in a series of virtual sessions at enhancing the information flow so that members for both of our organizations, colleagues and friends on both sides of the Atlantic can be more agile in a highly dynamic, competitive international environment. With that, I would like to introduce our two speakers. Lawrence Hanson is a noted attorney, customs attorney in the United States with 36 years of experience in international trade legal matters, including U.S. import and export regulations and free trade agreements involving the United States. Larry began his career as an attorney with the U.S. Customs Service, but his firm now handles civil and criminal investigations, audits, and the detention, seizure, and forfeiture of products, as well as the development of international trade compliance controls to anticipate and prevent international trade legal problems. Our second speaker, Jose Agaska. Jose is the managing director of Metrading International AG, which is based in Lugano and in Scottsdale, Arizona. Metrading has offices in Lugano, Switzerland, Istanbul, Turkey, Scottsdale, Arizona, USA, and Monterrey, Mexico. Sales of steel and aluminum processed and finished products are their primary focus. Jose also serves currently as vice chairman of AMSCI, and in his past positions, he was managing director of Cotino Caro, based in Germany, and managing director of Cotino and Ferrostall, also based in Germany. So with that, I will turn the program over to our speakers.
Well, great, everyone. I think I'm first up here. Can everyone hear me okay? Glad when things are working here. So, we're going to a couple of different topics to cover today. Obviously, our discussion of 232 is overshadowed by developments in the last 48 hours in the Ukraine. So I'm very glad we're going to add that to our topic here. Very important thing that affect the metal market, frankly, all of our markets around the world here. But our original topic was to look at the 232 situation involving the United States, in particular, a little bit of the background of that, which I think will be helpful as we predict the future. But also specifically from the U.S. customs perspective, what European traders, European exporters should anticipate when product is received in the United States by U.S. customs, exactly what procedures are involved here. So that will hopefully be helpful here. So, and I'll start with 232. 232, I think everyone probably knows, is a law that's been existing for some time, but it was used under Donald Trump in a different way than ever before. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 allows the president some rather extraordinary powers in cases of a national emergency, more specifically a threat to national security. The procedures are that the president has to consult with the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Commerce will confirm that there is a national security risk, and therefore the president will have the powers to do what he has done here. There are a number of slides here, just the dates that were involved here. I'll come in that to your reading for later, but in a nutshell, it's very simple. President Trump, now former President Trump, consulted with the Department of Commerce. They came back and said, yes, national security is threatened by foreign steel. National security was a buzzword they had to use because that gives the president the authority to use these extraordinary powers here. National security meant for most people, most scholarly commentators, meant our military. Would our military, our ability to defend ourselves militarily, be compromised if we were dependent upon foreign steel? The Secretary of Defense offered the opinion that not so much. We really could make our submarines and our aircraft carriers with domestic steel we already have. There's really no significant impact to our national security by foreign steel here. And almost the very next day, President Trump came out with the rather earth-shaking development that by national security under this act, he means economic security, jobs. And for those of us who are involved in trade law, that was just a shocking revelation. It really is hard to square that with obligations of all countries around the world under, in fact, in 1948 and the General Agreements on Tariff and Trade, where it was never intended to be a job protection national security issue here. So the history was not on Donald Trump's side on that. But nonetheless, President Trump orders tariffs under Section 232, 25% tariffs on steel from around the world, including our allies over in Europe, and 10% on aluminum here. Donald Trump is out of office, and President Biden comes in, and he did nothing. He did no very quick result here to change that. He complained about what Trump had done, but he didn't take any immediate action to change it. Almost a full year went by when he finally took some action here, and that was to introduce a relaxation, if you will, replacing the 232 tariffs, the 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum, with a tariff rate quota. We're going to allow a certain number of metric tons to come in without the 25%, and then after that threshold is met, country by country, then you will have the resumption of the 25%. So that is our real topic for discussion today, the October 31st, 2021 executive order involving steel here. And basically, like I just said, it replaces the 25% with a threshold level that would be allowed to come in without the 25% here. So not agreed amount, well, the decided upon amount would be of the TRQ is 33 MMT under 54 product categories. The list is about 54 pages. I'm glad to send it to people if you want. It's available on the customs website, but I can certainly send that link around to everyone here. And it works like this. Very importantly, the second paragraph of the order talks about derivative products. There will not be any 232 duties on derivative products. And that's very important because There are those who think that we should have, if you have, like in the anti-dumping context, derivative products are also undervalued and therefore need that special trade treatment. Not so with 232. So derivative products like the washing machines you make with the steel is not going to be, or the aluminum is not going to be covered by that. A critical issue is found in paragraph 3, and that is the idea of what steel. What EU steel? Because you talk about EU steel, if it's one thing, it's not one thing. There's many different EU countries all who produce steel. How are we going to administer that? And we specifically, U.S. specifically, did not want to have Russian slab, for example, going into the EU and then being processed. So they use a concept called wherever the steel was melted and poured. In our context for today, this very clearly excludes Russian slab. Or any Russian products that would be going into the EU. It's where it's melted and poured. This is a concept that we've seen sometimes here and there. They try to squeeze in anti-dumping, but not successfully. We see it in textiles, actually, where it's a yarn forward versus fabric forward for making sweaters. But melted and poured, wherever the metal is melted and poured, that is the origin of the metal. And not just specifically, I think you can read into that Russian slab can't be the subject of this this benefit here, this TRQ benefit. Documentation will be repeated. I'll mention this in a little bit here as well. Here, as you know, if you practice with these things at all internationally, the 232 process allows exclusions. So we've helped a countless number of clients obtain exclusions for this. Very importantly, if you are subject to an exclusion, if you have earned an exclusion, obtained an exclusion from the Department of Commerce, that will continue. And that's a very important thing here. So it's not just a certain metric tonnage of a quota. In addition to that, you add any tonnage that would be allowed under an exclusion. And there's some particulars about how that exclusion will be done. And we've already talked to the Department of Commerce on behalf of some clients who hadn't used all their exclusion and thought that they'd now lose that quantity. And Department of Commerce has told us, at least informally, that you will be able to use any unused exclusion going forward here, which is a very big plus for those who have obtained exclusions but haven't used up that exclusion yet, that quantity under that exclusion here. So. Paragraph 5 is the obvious one. If after the thresholds have met, again, country by country, then of course it will resort to the 25% additional tariff here. The next section talks about how they're going to adjust the TRQ volume here. There is a rollover provision that is basically a quarter ahead. So any unused quota in quarter number 1, which we're in right now, would be rolled into quarter number 3. Any unused quota that would be in quarter number 2, which begins on April 1st through June 1st, would then be rolled into quarter number 4, and so on and so forth. A 1 quarter lag, if you will. So unused quota will be rolled over into the future is the plan here. So there's provisions for readjustments and negotiation of these things. A pledge to continue discussions is really what they are. If the TRQ, the whole purpose behind this was to look at excess capacity in the world. And so that's going to be a constant review by the United States and the EU partners together, evaluating that and see where that goes. Politics will certainly rein in on that as well here. So there's a consultation requirement. Aluminum is roughly the same, some slight difference here, but overall it's the same. It was, it was a 10% tariff, but now it's going to be a tariff rate quota, 18,000 metric tons for unwrought aluminum under two specific categories that are there. Again, allocated by country basis, and I'm going to show you a slide here how that looks. There, derivative products again are not covered by this, which is good news. The documentation required here will not just be it's not really a pour analysis, but a certificate of analysis must be provided for each aluminum product. Add that to the documentation requirements. Frankly, you had to do that anyway in order for classification purposes. So it's now to be documented, not just claimed, but actually documented. Exclusions will still apply as well, just as it does for steel here. And then it goes back to 10% at once the quantity level is met there. There's a rollover provision, more of a semi-annual basis here. No more than 60% of the TRQ should be in the first half of the year. So that's sort of a quantitative limitation within the quantitative limitation for what that is worth here. Customs has said there'll be a public website on this. This is not the first time the United States has administered quotas. We have a great deal of experience administering quotas. And what happens is there's usually private parties, but even now the US will have a running total where everyone can get that pretty readily here. You'll see situations just in quotas where we're going to have quotas almost being met and be filled up, and that's going to be a problem for people. So I want to spend a couple of moments just talking about what to expect if you're exporting European metal to the United States. What's going to happen here? A couple documentation requirements that are going to happen here. One is a certification of compliance by the importer. I swear I'm complying with the law, basically. The catch on that will be at two different levels here. One would be at the import specialist level. Upon arrival, your documentation for European metal will be reviewed very closely. And they may get requests for information. They'll ask about production. They may ask a lot of things like that. As a technical matter, that doesn't necessarily hold up your shipment. They can release the shipment without getting this information ahead of time. And that's what we urge customs to do here. Otherwise, they're going to have a lot of steel sitting at the ports. So they don't really want that. We have enough trouble with our ports these days with container goods and things like that. So they don't want the bulk or even the containerized goods sitting at our port here. So they will likely let it go and do a post-entry audit or post-entry review after it's already been gone there. Customs does have the right to request a redelivery of goods they find to be imported contrary to law. That rarely happens with bulk steel of any sort, just because of the hassle of it all. I mean, imagine, an entire shipment of cold rolled or anything, being brought back to the port. It's not really practical. So there will be penalties, penalties and liquidated damages. The maximum civil penalty under U.S. law for a violation of these provisions would be a additional duty, essentially, of 100% of the value of every import that is done in error. That is a very significant penalty, and that is in cases of fraud. In addition, there's a possibility of liquidated damages. We don't know this for sure, but we can predict from how they've handled similar things in the past that they would consider these articles to be restricted and prohibited merchandise. And therefore, the liquidated damages can be up to 3 times the value of the merchandise. So it is extremely important to make sure we have nuances correct in this. Brief note on just how this has worked on there. I already covered the melted and poured here. The actual customs entry will have to have 2 numbers. This is consistent with the 232 actions anyway. You always had to have a Chapter 99 number, which you had to be able to identify and classify correctly pursuant to the tariff schedule, as well as the underlying tariff number from Chapter 71, 72, or any other metal chapter there. And so then you have to file that. And an average customs house broker in the United States will not find difficulty with the paperwork. They should not. This is relatively straightforward, and they've been doing it already for Chapter 99 entries for 232 and 301 entries where additional duty has been owed on Chinese goods. So they should not have any difficulty with this. Your difficulty will be making sure you are in the right category, the right tariff number on these things here. This is just one page of 54 pages of what the kind of things you'll be looking at under U.S. law. You have a description of the goods on our top one here, hot rolled sheet under certain tariff numbers. And Austria is going to get 3.6 million kilograms a year and 901,000 each of the 4 quarters. And so I've only given you Austria. But there's 54 others that are broken down by country in the EU and by the tariff number, the classification you have for that metal. Very important, extremely important to get that tariff number right, because if you have the wrong tariff number, you're going to have the wrong analysis here. And this happens with quota all the time. And frankly, it's the reason why people commit fraud sometimes. They purposely misdeclare the classification to get into a different tariff quota, a different tariff category to their benefit here. I've already covered this, I think, here. The exclusion process remains a very vibrant, very active issue here in the United States. So do not think that the TRQ is the only thing you should look at. You should definitely look at the exclusion process as well, because that would be in addition to the quantity amounts that are there. So don't overlook that at all. What to expect regarding U.S. enforcement? There's going to be a lot of U.S. enforcement. That's flat out there. It's how it's going to be. Biden administration has not signaled any relaxation of these things here. Political pressures in the United States are going to require a great deal of attention to this. There are those who think we should just not have trade in steel. The sole, the complete protectionists in the United States. So there'd be a lot of pressure for U.S. Customs to enforce this, and they will do so enthusiastically on these things here. So be aware of the procedural problems if they are not insurmountable at all. It is really just a matter of knowing your product well and reading the 54-page list of breaking down by country very well here. Internal compliance, as always, will be the key to that. And of course, get help when you need it. The only other comment I'll add here, and I'll leave the rest of this for questions and answers, is obviously the Ukraine situation will heighten this even more. There will be a great deal of scrutiny of anything coming from the Ukraine, especially the two special regions that are identified by Putin as well. You know better than I do what metal comes out of Ukraine, but anything out of Russia and anything out of the Ukraine will get a great deal of scrutiny here. So that ends my remarks here, and I will turn it over here. That's the end of me.
Well, thank you so much, Larry. That was highly interesting, and I just want to inform everybody that everybody can raise questions in the chat function, and this will be collected and answered later on at the end in the Q&A section. And all the presentations will be sent after the webinar. And Larry, you came actually to a very important point, and that is basically how the US administration then finally is going to deal with replacements. That means what is going to happen if now steel from Russia and from the Ukraine is not moving anymore. I mean, particularly from the Ukraine, which is basically depending on Russia. And that means the steel mills will most likely not work or work only if the Russians want. So, and that of course means that a complete disruption of the global supplies. And that brings me actually to Fabrizio. Fabrizio, if you can actually tell us with your explanations and what's happening in Europe with regards to the safeguards, the implications that we have seen in the past, and what the European Commission is also heading for, that you perhaps also make a remark when it comes now to sanctions against Russian steel imports. What and how flexible the European Commission might react, and which brings then basically also the question to the United States, to Larry later on, to the same effect. So would be very happy to hear you, Fabrizio.
Yes, thanks, Alexander. Thanks to the organizers and to the audience. Indeed, we are leaving. I mean, I prepared some slides, but there is no need to display them. I mean, they are available later for all the participants. But in the few slides that I had prepared, I was trying to emphasize that we are living in Europe an unprecedented era, where we are seeing so many initiatives on the part of the Commission. Only in the last 12 months, we have seen proposals, white papers in different areas of trade to be interpreted in a more broad sense than covering only safeguard and the trade defense instruments. For example, you may have heard about the foreign subsidy proposal, the CBAM, which aims at offsetting the imbalance created by the CO2 emissions limits in Europe, the deforestation, the protection against economic coercion, and for example, also the ban on forced labor. These are just a few examples. So these days, to do business in Europe, in the steel area, but also in other areas, is becoming particularly problematic. There is a high degree of compliance required. There is a need for a very considerable reactiveness on the part of businessmen, because people are changing continuously. And there is also the need to be very, very careful, because the measures are going to be quite severe. So we are experiencing a U-turn in the administration of trade policy in Europe, where the Commission and the EU institutions are becoming much more bold and aggressive in taking measures to, let's say, protect its own market and to defend the principle. Now, with this in this scenario, there is an important event, which is one of the topic under discussion, which is the ongoing review of safeguard measures on steel. As you may recall, there have been measures imposed back in 2019, mainly as a reaction to the adoption of the 232 measures in March 2018. Those measures, which initially were supposed to stay in force for 3 years, have then been renewed until 2024. And after 2 reviews, now we are undergoing the third review. And I think I know that Alexander is not very eager to talk about the past, so I will not discuss about what was changed compared to the first measures. But what is important to know is that the ongoing review has a very broad scope. First of all, it is investigating how and whether the allocation and management of tariff rate quotas are properly working. As you may know, there are 26 categories, and for each category, there is in principle a allocation by country, by major exporting country, with a residual quota for all other third countries, with the possibility that the big exporters can also take part of this residual quota if that is left unused in the last quarter of the year. So they are one of the elements that the ongoing review is focusing on, is this aspect. Then a second important topic is the crowding out of traditional trade flows. So practically for the products which are more sensitive and more where there are more, let's say, larger exporters, such as, for example, wire rod, rebars, and some others, there is a focus on whether the current system, which is trying to avoid that big exporters, exporting countries, take too much of the residual quota, is also under scrutiny. Then another topic which is of big interest is the review and the reassessment of the list of countries which are benefiting from an exclusions on the ground of their developing status, and the fact that in the original investigation, their exports were below 3% of total imports into the EU. Every year, this list is reviewed because some developing countries may, in the meantime, exceed the 3% threshold, and as such, they are made subject to the application of the measures. They lose their benefit of no measure. Then another topic which is under discussion is the level of liberalization. Currently, it is foreseen that every year there is an increase in the duty-free quota. Now this level is at 3%. The Commission will assess whether this level of liberalization should be modified. And last but not least, the impact of the change in the US Section 232 measures in the light of the safeguard measures. Now, in this respect, it's clear that the fact that European steel are regaining access, at least 3.3 million of European steel is regaining access to the US, is an important element, but this does not affect the rationale of the original safeguard measures, which was to offset the possible deflection of trade. So basically goods which coming from big exporting countries like Turkey, India, and so on, which would not be able to go to the US and then could go to the European Union. That logic still remains because, as we all know, the US-EU deal is only applicable to the bilateral relationship between these two jurisdictions. So we are, this review will be terminated by 30 June. So we will know the preliminary conclusion normally in the course of the month of April. In all this very hectic scenario, now, as we mentioned, we can expect sanctions on the part of Europe. Today, the President of the Commission announced that there will be very, very severe sanctions aimed at reducing the, let's say, the economic, affecting the economic strength of Russia with a view to reduce its military power. We are facing a new type of sanction because so far sanctions were adopted in a more political sense, and they had normally, in most cases, two scope of application: freezing the funds of the listed persons in the countries concerned and banning their entry into the territory of the European Union. Those were the typical sanctions which were applied against Libya, against Venezuela, and so on. Now we are seeing measures which will have a more economic impact, which means that not only products from Russia will be affected, but also exports from the European Union to Russia. So this will be something which will severely affect also the availability to trade on the part of the European businessmen. So this is something which certainly we can discuss maybe later in the Q&A session, but it's something which will certainly have a very important impact on our European businessmen. A few final comments regarding the possible evolution of the EU-US agreement. I mean, I will not repeat what we just heard, and in a very comprehensive way, but it's also important to know that there are discussions about the possible conclusion of an international agreement which would have on steel, which would have as scope the idea of allowing free circulation of green steel, meaning this free circulation would be limited to countries which apply rules and principles alike to those that the European Union adopted with the CO2 emission regulation. These solutions may range from regional solutions like the ongoing and the highly discussed EU CBAM proposal, or a solution which will aim at having a global carbon price, which is the solution which is more favored by the in the multilateral arena, WTO, IMF, or a climate club, so a club among countries which share the same principle and values about reduction of emissions. But all this is something to come, which we will not, in the best scenario, will not see the light before 3-4 years. So it remains to be seen what will happen in the short term with this famous CBAM regulation. So to conclude, some final thoughts. The rationale of the EU safeguard measures are still applicable. So the excess of capacity 232. So in this respect, even though it is undeniable that there are recent developments which seem to be quite dramatic, the price increase of steel, the US-EU agreement, but even though those developments may affect to a certain extent the logic of the initial measures, I believe, if I had to bet, I think that the measures this review will not lead to any dramatic change. We can expect that measures will remain in force despite the US-EU agreement. This in the short term, but probably in the mid-term, so in the next 3 to 4 years, we will see certainly some more changes in this regulatory arena, especially as a result of the CBAM and similar initiatives.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Very informative, certainly much material for thought and for future discussion. With that, I'd like to turn to Mr. Jose Gasca, the Managing Director of Metrading International AG, based in Lugano, Switzerland, and Scottsdale, Arizona. Jose, the floor is yours. Jose, we can't hear you. Could you turn on your, take your mute?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep. Yes, there you are.
Sorry about that.
Yep.
I was thanking you, thanking Ricardo, and thanking Alexander for your kind invitation today to speak to such a great audience. And also we want to express our sympathies for our friends from the Ukraine. And we really hope for a quick solution on this very complicated situation. Let me share my screen with you so you can see my presentation today. Can you see it?
We did. We saw your first slide, and then it went away.
Now you see it probably, right?
No, I don't. No, we had it originally, Jose. It was up there originally when you started speaking, and then, but it's not there now.
Let me see.
Jose, I will share it for you.
Perfect.
I will share it for you, and you just tell me if I need to go to the next slide.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, there we go.
All right. So we're, I mean, I was invited to discuss about perspectives of dealing with safeguards and tariffs and other forms of trade barriers. Alexander and Ricardo were kind enough to request me to talk about more about a practical experience, and that's basically what we have, as we are a trading and processing distribution house. As Richard mentioned, we're present here in Lugano, Switzerland, with offices in Istanbul, Turkey, Scottsdale, Arizona, USA, and Monterrey, Mexico. So basically what we do is we buy steel from different parts of the world, primarily flat products. We basically stopped doing, or we reduced our involvement on long products in 2018 and went into full products in 2018, basically because we saw more opportunities to complement markets, which is something that I'm going to talk in a second. The case study is basically our experience in North America, Canada, but primarily US and Mexico. We've been developing opportunities on importing steel and aluminum since the 90s, yeah, consistently. In this process, we have basically achieved a great knowledge of the North American steel market. I personally, as Richard pointed out, had the pleasure to work for 2 steel mills and 2 trading houses. But he didn't mention my experience with Çolakoglu, Turkey, where I was invited by my friends from Çolakoglu to open for them an office in Houston, Texas in 2012. Basically, we opened the office, we developed the whole infrastructure for the office to be able to be the import of record, sell directly to end users without the involvement of third parties. We were able to put together the infrastructure for logistics, for customs, and duty payments in the US, financing customers, credit insurance, distribution, etc., etc. This case, I believe, is a very good example of how to deal with this new era, yeah, of the markets becoming more and more protectionists. If you can move to the next one. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's one thing that is very important is to have direct relationship, of course, with producers, customers, and obviously the whole chain of service providers in the meantime. I mean, logistic operators, stevedores, custom brokers have full visibility, full openness, and full transparency in the whole process of prospecting and developing a market. The next one, Ricardo, please. We have limited time today. I would like to talk to you about all the products that we handle in our markets. But I chose the hard rolled just to be very quick, and it basically reflects a very good situation that I will ask you just to keep in your mind the most important figures of these slides for your comprehension when we talk a little bit more about this in the next slides. So these are the 3 last years of hard roll production worldwide, yeah, including obviously the recovery in 2021 from the pandemic. So you can see there is a total production of 846 million. Main producers, China and United States, yeah, at the top of the list, yeah. Can you continue, please? The next one, please. Now, if we compare that to consumption, we're obviously going to see a disruption from what we were seeing the years before. But including the recovery from the pandemic, we are obviously recovering quick, and in particular, Europe, United States, Mexico are recovering quick in terms of consumption. We are at 814. There is still a big gap between and to be filled between world production and world consumption, of course. We have the next one, please. We have a slide that we put together for exports, total exports from different countries at 86 million at this point, yeah. So a little bit more than 10% of the world steel production. And we have if you move to the next one. And here we can see the imports also worldwide, yeah. So these slides are showing us that in some countries, I mean, we see a disruption in terms of production and consumption. The US, if you, whenever you have access, and we will share my presentation with you, you will see the US is going to have, although it has new production being installed at this moment, but obviously not being completely utilized. And last week it was announced by one of the major producers that they are actually shutting down one mill, and we believe that the new mills will not be able to produce at full scale. With that production in hand, demand will be higher than the current production for 2021, for 2022, and we believe that that's going to be a natural a need for imports, yeah. So here's where the problem comes when you don't deal with imports on an orderly manner. We see the prices of hard roll coils last year, basically creating a big disruption in the market in the US. Yeah, This obviously created a lot of problems for the domestic mills that had to basically drop their prices very drastically. It created also a big problem for those end users, distributors that had big inventories. And in particular, if we see it, this happened between September and October of last year. Not natural reasons. This was not because there was an increase of offers in the market only. It was not because demand drastically dropped. It was done because of certain practices of certain importers in the US that decided to fill up their quotas instead of maximizing prices or trying to keep prices at a market level. And obviously this is a problem for the US, also provoking what Larry mentioned in 2018, when Section 232 was installed. But also, if we go back even to 2001, when President Bush came with the idea of Section 201. Now, how can we manage imports into a country on a consistent way and harmonic fashion? Can you put please the next one, Ricardo? So here's the reality. I mean, protectionism will continue. The US, Mexico, Canada have been a protectionist market, protected market since many years ago. This will not change by a change of administration. This will continue. We have dealt through Section 201, Section 232. We have dealt with Canadians' reference prices and the Mexican safeguards to protect the markets. Obviously, we have dealt with risks of having shipments in the middle of the ocean when these sections, when these safeguards have been announced, not implemented, but announced. And you can imagine the different implications that financial and market that this represents for a company like ours and for many of my colleagues in the audience. Now, the best way in my experience, and I think that there are some players also in the panel that can confirm this, is basically to have a very detailed market strategy. You need to focus your import strategy on a targeted industry. Within that industry, a sector and a niche. If you do this way, and you basically be complementing the market, can you change that? Can you change the slide? The business will be consistent and will be seen as a long term. That's also what customers and mills are requiring from people representing them in different markets. You have obviously to choose your supplier. Yeah, this is what we call the CYSC and C strategy, which is choose your supplier, choose your customer, and comply with the market, comply with the requirements of importing on each market. In particular, in the US, and here I'm going to refer to our current operation with Metrading and the work that we did for Cholacoglu in the past. We basically sold to customers that we knew that really needed the steel, that really needed certain types of steel, certain grades, certain gauges, certain thicknesses that the domestic mills will not be providing at that time. Obviously, in our main areas of sales are the coastal areas in the United States. We try to avoid the Great Lakes simply because because our target is to complement, right, and to provide these products to those customers that are really needing it, and that's the way to do it, in my opinion. We are very open with our customers, with our mills. We're very open also with we have a dialogue with the domestic mills in the U.S. As a matter of fact, when we do these strategies, we are also exporting U.S. material to other countries, particularly Latin America, Mexico. So this way, it's guaranteed to have a long-term vision. Obviously, the customers they require a continuity. In particular, those with value added reach in the yellow goods sector, appliances, automotive, and very, very important. It's, as I said, protectionism will continue, and you will be most likely investigated if you are successful with your strategy. However, the objective then changes. The objective should not be to avoid to be investigated or included on a dumping investigation. Your objective should be to be able to openly defend yourself and to openly show the Department of Commerce that you did your business on a correct matter, yeah, complementing the market. For this, we guarantee to the mills that we represent an arm's length visibility of whether their products were used in the market, by which customer, in which application, and which location, and at what price. I refer again to the case of Cholacoglu. When I was working with them, we had a very good system that we implemented on a daily checkup of price between Turkey and the US. So there were weeks that when the price was higher in Turkey, we decided not to do it because we wanted to avoid by any means the possibility of being dumped. We were accused of dumping, but we were able to defend ourselves very well. I personally served as a witness in one of the investigations, and this was the way to do it. So I hope that this practical experience is of help. If you have any questions or anything more that we can share with you, or we can help you with your strategy of eventually selling into North America, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jose. It was highly interesting, and you actually just mentioned it. If there are any questions, you can always use the chat function, and we will then collect those questions and, subject to the timing available, raise these questions with the panelists. And now we have Jean-Luc, and Jean-Luc, with his 35 years experience in maritime issues, representing the Port of Antwerp, will tell us something about his experience and what the Port of Antwerp is doing. I mean, I think all of us experienced in the past 4 months at least, the big piling up of material imports and how the different warehouses, terminals were struggling actually to handle all those imports. And I'm sure that Jean-Luc will give us now the recipes how Antwerp will deal with this and other challenges in the future. Thank you very much, Jean-Luc.
We will see. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much being part of this webinar. Thank you to EUROMETAL and AMSC. I will have an insight of the Port of Antwerp, and to make you clear the challenges we have in the port and the supply chain challenges everybody has in general. So I will start my presentation and try to have it shared with you. Just a second. Yeah. I share. Okay. Can you see it in full page?
It's perfect like that. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So, of course, steel trade and steel traffics are very, very important for the port of Antwerp. And therefore, I hope I can go to the next slides. First of all, I want to show you about the latest results we had in the port of Antwerp. We have reached 240 million tons in 2021, and with, in fact, increases in all segments of transport. There is a slight stagnation in the containers, but a very strong revival on the break bulk with 74% increase. That's making the challenges on the key quite high. The evolutions you see over here, of course, during the years, container is very important, but break bulk is also increasing very strongly. If you see this this repartition of all cargo types, you see that United States of America represents for the port of Antwerp 26.4 million tons, which is quite huge. Also, looking at the containers, we have impressive figures, as you can see over here. I will go a little bit quicker on these slides because we will have the presentation afterwards. You receive it. In number of TEUs, we have a 12 million TEUs, which is also very impressive. A few other more figures, and to see the evolution we have with the throughput of steel between through the port of Antwerp. So you see over the years, and the pandemic is very clear over here in 2019, 2020, and then it was really a boost afterwards. The total steel volume is also significant over here. And you see also the parts of the imports very increasing last year. We have 5.8 steel volume, which is very important. By country, you see the repartition, and India is on the top together with Russia. Maybe it will change now with the latest situations, of course, and also a lot of Asian tonnage coming over here. So USA for export from Antwerp is #1, and particularly this last year it was very important with 1.1 million metric tons of steel going from Europe, going through Antwerp to the United States. At the import side, You have we have very booming India volumes, very impressive, as you can see. They are far away from all the others. And then at the second, you have Vietnam, but I also think there is a part of Chinese steel going through Vietnam, if I'm not wrong. And then afterwards, also very strong with Turkey and Taiwan and the other ones. Very proud to notice and to announce you that we are again since last year the #1 in break bulk cargo, break bulk, which is very important for the port of Antwerp because of its added value and the work that is done in the port. So we are the leading port for break bulk cargo, and of this break bulk cargo, let's say it's about 75% steel cargo. Very balanced between Antwerp and the USA. Import and export, it's a nice balance. So in terms of the ports between Antwerp and United States, these are total volumes. These are not steel volumes. It's a total volume. Houston is on the top, probably, or not probably, but because also of the chemical cluster we have with Houston and quite a lot of chemicals. New York important as well, followed by Norfolk and Charleston. Containers, also big volumes, and you see also an increasing volume through the years. In number of TEU, you have an overview over here by ports, having Houston on top. In tonnage and in TEU in this case, and in numbers of metric tons, that's going by cargo type. I will go through that. I will bypass it so you have the figures afterwards. Also a word about the Port of Antwerp Bruges merge we will have. What is it about? Who are we? The two ports of Antwerp and Bruges will merge together. And we are inland located about 80 kilometers inland, and Bruges is at the seaside. We will become one single port to have a stronger position in the logistical chain, interconnectivity and energy transition. So we will become a leading container port in Europe together, but already now the biggest car handling. We have the biggest terminal Ro-Ro in Europe, in Zeebrugge. And we are the largest chemical hub of Europe, the second cluster worldwide after Houston. Very important gas installations at Zeebrugge, and an impressive throughput we have on a yearly basis. So this is an historic agreement for us, and we will merge at the end of April together with Zeebrugge, and will become one port, and aiming a sustainable growth, to have a resilience positions, and also a leadership in transition. I will leave this slide for you later on, but mainly Bruges is a very strong Ro-Ro for the import of gas and oil and chemicals, I mean, and containers. And Antwerp, very important for containers, break bulk and chemical products, as we have also several industries, important industries, chemical industries in Antwerp, in the port of Antwerp. So together we are interconnected by rail, by pipeline, roads, but also we can go on an estuary shipping between Bruges and Antwerp. Also very important, the two ports for to go to the energy transition, because we have done these imports of gases, and we will have import of hydrogen, which will be more and more important in different segments, not only in industry, but also in transport and other applications. So we have imports of gas and hydrogen, and we will have a capture of carbon to be liquefied and again go to Zeebrugge and further on by ship probably. Also, giving with you that we have a big role as a community builder, and we want to be present with our customers, direct or indirect customers, and that's an important part of our mission of the Port of Antwerp. So the next fair we will have is at Intermodal in Sao Paulo. So we have our own representative from the Port of Antwerp, which is Wannes Vincent, who will be there. So this is going on between the 15th and the 17th of March. And also a warm welcome at our Antwerp XL Break Bulk conference and expo, which will be held in October between the 4th and the 6th of October. So I know that it was asked to me to talk about initiatives dealing with the safeguards. And we, of course, identified the disturbances of the global supply chains coming from the increasing number of reports about it, and the data records we received ourselves. Today we are confronted with terminals which are overcrowded. The cargo is remaining at the terminal far too long, resulting in a more difficult efficiency of operations and making the available capacity drops sharply. The main reasons also are to be found in the safeguard disturbances. There is simply too much cargo stored on the terminals, waiting for delivery to inland customers. And then together with a quite strong export volume we have to deal with, and also the safeguards across, there is for the moment too much cargo that is remaining on the quay sites. So the cargo rotation time is presently extremely low, and something has to be done about it. And also, I believe the steel manufacturer can help in this by having better notice to what is coming to the ports. So I believe this is also a part of the problem that can be solved in that way, that to give a better notice to the ports and to the terminals. We as Port Authority, we are not a private company. And we are not commercially involved. We are not a commercial entity. We are, in fact, landlords giving port spaces in concession to private stakeholders. We cannot force the private companies in some of their strategic decisions. But we of course can talk and discuss with them in order to improve the current situation. But this can only be done with all parties together in a good understanding. And then for the future, I must see again in January, the Port of Antwerp reports an increase of break bulk cargo of about 98.5% compared to the same period of the same month last year. In January this year, we had more than 1 million tons of conventional general cargo that was transshipped, which is a double figure if you compare it with January last year. So with a throughput of more than 1 million tons for the 7th month in a row, this cargo type is held well up. Iron and steel throughput was still the driver, more than doubling compared with the weak month of January last year. So if we compare with the volumes of November and December, we see indeed a decrease of 100,000 metric tons, which may be a seasonal thing to see. On the supply side, we see an increase of steel volumes coming from Taiwan, Vietnam, and also Brazil, but that might be a one-off. While steel from India has been declining a little bit since Q4 last year, and even fell sharply in January. On the output side, the steel to the US is falling significantly after a strong Q4 last year, while steel to Mexico is growing strongly again. So that is what I in a nutshell, what I wanted to talk about. I'm open to your questions about what we can do as a port to help you in the logistic chain challenges.
Thank you, Jean-Luc. That was very informative, a lot of very interesting insights for our consideration. Thank you. As Alexander mentioned at the beginning, we've added a new component this morning due to this morning's developments in Ukraine. So we will take a look at, consider the topic, the invasion of Ukraine, how safeguard quotas and steel supplies will be affected. And to address that topic, we have joining us today, Mr. Alexander Surik, who's who is from Ukraine and is a consultant, well-known consultant in metals and mining. So Alexander, we're happy to hear your thoughts and listen to your insights.
Thank you, Richard, for the introduction. It was quite a short notice for me, so I just apologize that there are no slides. So there was a very, very short time to prepare because all the action has started just this morning. And as an emotional comment, it is just unbelievable for the 21st century that one of the largest armies in the world invading a neighboring city, invading neighboring country without any reasoning behind. Moreover, this country, I mean Russia, guaranteed safetyness of Ukraine in 1994, together with the US and the UK, just for disarming of nuclear weapons. So that was emotional part. I will try to give a very short overview of what is going on, because effectively this is impacting short-term implications of the development. I would try to describe like potential long-term implications, at least their directions, because now there are a lot of unclear points. The situation is developing rapidly. So invasion started this morning from basically 3 directions in Ukraine. So it started from the east, where already there were some regions invaded earlier by Russia, and also from northern parts and from the southern part. According to the announcements of the Ukrainian media, the biggest progress of Russian forces is noticed from the south. And all major cities, including Kyiv, which is capital of Ukraine, Kharkiv and Sumy, they were able to defend themselves for the moment. Because what should be remarked is that the cities are located quite close to the Russian border. So Russia also started invasion from the territory of Belarus. This means that there are some 80, 100 kilometers or 50, 60 miles from the border. The same as for Kharkiv, therefore it's really nearby. And the current status is that despite heavy bombing with rockets of all the territory of Ukraine, it is reported that Ukraine maintained its air defense systems. It maintained even aviation. And basically, hopefully, invasion is not progressing so well as it is expected. From the general comments, it was also announced that President Biden is going to give his comments in around half an hour, a little bit later on, so we will hear all those things. What is going on amid this political developments? Of course, in the short term, I would say right now, it is already distorting a steel supply chain, because both countries are involved heavily in the supply chain for all products, because Ukraine and Russia are one of the largest global suppliers of iron ore. And for some regions, it is a very, very essential supply. And we will come also to some particular patterns of those supplies, why the developments are extremely risky. Also of semi-finished products, particularly to the European market, because there are players who have assets also in the US and other regions, but the most exposed market for both Ukrainian and also Russian semis would be Europe. And of course, as a third horizon, finished products, you also know that both countries are big exporters and also big steel producers. So we are talking about steel production of less than 10 million tons, so by memory around 8 million tons per month. So we have 6.5 million tons coming from Russia of crude steel production, and 1.8, 1.9 million tons which are produced in Ukraine. So a little bit like step-by-step observation. So you know that starting with iron ore can be supplied from Russia using Baltic ports. For example, Ust-Luga, and this is going towards European Atlantic ports. But in the last years, one of the largest customers for both Russia and Ukraine, China became one of the largest customers for both countries. And this is exported from the Black Sea. Furthermore, effectively, you know, with some nuances, there is only one Cape-size port, which is nearby Odessa, which is usually able to process Cape-size vessels. There are some nuances, so specialist shippers, they know that there are some nuances where you can handle this with other ports within volumes and so on. But effectively, players like Metal Invest would ship the iron ore to China via Ukraine as a transit. So the first implication. Not even mentioning Ukrainian producers, Metrading, one of the large producers, and Ferrexpo. For the European markets, this shortage of the Ukrainian supplies can have even higher implications than shortage of Russian supplies, because both countries are active in China, but first Alpine, you still cautiously would source a lot of iron ore. Second cluster is belonging to semi-finished products. For Europe, those are first of all slabs. And for the regions like Middle East, those will be billets, square billets. And of course, part of the assets, for example, player like an LMK would supply their slabs to the European, to part of the European assets via Baltic Sea. But due to logistical reasons, it's once again, we talk about Black Sea as a major exporter to the Mediterranean area, to the rolling mills, and of course, Metrading, who is located in Mariupol. And for your feeling, it's around 60 kilometers or 30-40 miles far away from Donetsk. So basically, it's currently a war zone. It's very direct implications. Furthermore, if there are shippers, just please correct me, because there are also quite confusing news, and we always must be very careful, because there is also certain information which is speculated to direct sorts of people in certain way. But it was also reported today that there are problems to ship materials also from the Russian ports, for example, from Novorossiysk, because one Turkish ship was damaged on the way from Odessa to Romania. And there are issues with other ships. This means that owners of the ships, they are not only avoiding Ukrainian ports, but also Russian ports. This means that there is a big raising, like short-term problem in the Black Sea as a short-term disruption of the supply. And of course, this is impacting also European market, first of all, European market in which terms, because an LMK and Metrading, they are one of the largest rollers, also in the US. There was discussion in the first report about all the situation of the supplies, because Evras has assets, so basically we are living in the global world. But the strongest and implication we would expect for Europe, the strongest implications we would expect for Europe. And as a system dynamic, it is impacting basically all markets, because shortage of billets would lead to a shortage of scrap, or higher consumption of scrap, and we are going to see, shortage of iron ore and so on. So it is it's quite difficult right now to make with such a short notice kind of evaluation of the system dynamic of what is going to happen. And of course, next horizon is more long term. It is unclear what is going to be a reaction of the global community for this act of aggression. What kind of sanctions, and of course this will definitely impact in certain way the steel market, but in which way, I guess first of all we are going to learn already in some 30-35 minutes, also from President Biden. And it also depends on the European reaction of the European countries and also of the Asian players. So basically, this is a short notice, short overview from my side. I would be happy and glad to answer your questions.
Well, thank you, Alexander. I can't imagine how difficult this is for you. So our hearts go out to you. I know that we're dealing with a fog of war right now. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of answers that we don't know the question to, and in some cases we don't even know the questions. But your willingness to speak to us today is really helps us begin that understanding. So thank you.
Thank you also from my side. Highly interesting have such information, and which brings me actually to a question, addressed to Larry on the US side and Fabrizio on the EU side. We were talking about, or what Alexander also said rightfully, is that there are also Russian entities abroad. That means in the US and also in the EU. And when we are considering them, are they considered, first question, are they considered Russian, or are they considered US or EU entities when they are actually having their own companies actually abroad to run? And number two is, and that's, I think, what worries very many people with regards to the supply chain now, is when this subject of shortness is being addressed to the EU. That means that material supplies from Ukraine and also from Russia will not be there most likely in a moment. That needs to be substituted. That means basically that the safeguard measures needs to be amended. That means that actually some other quotas needs to be increased, at least substituted. So will this come automatically from actually the administration and from the European Commission on the European side, or does this require the request of the steel users? Perhaps Fabrizio, you can make the start actually on the EU side, and then
Yes,
Larry
yeah.
can say something there.
Thanks, Alexander. I lost a big part of your question because I was disconnected, but I understand. I think I can understand what the scope is. So no, it's not the kind of regular trade measure. So it's a political measure which is governed by the special rules. And as you know, there is need for unanimity from the 27 member states. So in this framework, the political prevails over the trade. So it's not an ordinary trade measure which requires the involvement of the stakeholders. And let's not forget that it's not clear what the scope of the measures will be. They will try to hit the most sensitive areas, so certainly steel, but also other areas. And as we have been reading in the last days, probably we will also suffer from the consequences of this regarding the gas. So it will be, in any case, there will be no involvement of the stakeholders, users, importers, or producers.
Well, yes, but there are, let's say, there are two sides of the coin. The one side. Hello, you hear me? The one side is that the Ukraine will not be in a position to supply. So that's number one, and the Russians most likely will not be permitted to supply. So that is basically, these are two different subjects, and that means if, for example, Ukraine is not in a position to supply, then there's a lack of material in the countries of destination. So this is affecting, of course, all the end users, and that means steel processors, etc. And then, of course, there needs to be a substitute actually to make material available as a substitute for those which is not coming. So will this be considered by the European Commission, or does this need the input of the stakeholders?
No, certainly in the I mean, again, I lost part of the question. In the framework of the ongoing review, I am quite convinced that there is a rumor for this sudden and unforeseeable development. So again, considering the shortage which could come from Russia and Ukraine, I think that there is an objective ground for the Commission to consider whether the extent and scope of safeguard measures still makes sense in light of this big event. And so for this, there is no need for the stakeholders to make a request. The Commission can discuss this on its own motion.
Yeah, Alexander, let me weigh in on that. I certainly agree with Fabrizio's comments here. There's a distinction between a good reason for an adjustment and the automatic nature of any adjustment. I would not even begin to offer any opinion on EU politics or processes there, but certainly the U.S. perspective, there are two thoughts here. The adjustment of a quantity level, given the circumstances in Ukraine, will not be automatic. There's no formula for that or anything. But the politicians can do things as fast as politicians want to do them. In my country, that's not very fast, but maybe there's some urgency on that. But another angle here you might consider, if you have European product coming to the United States, is to take advantage of the U.S. exclusion process. Because short supply in the United States would be a reason for that. So if all of a sudden there was a shortage of material from the normal and traditional supply chain, then maybe that would be a basis for the exclusion there. And that can be done relatively quick in terms of filing an exclusion, identifying the urgent need for that product in the United States that can't be made up through this. And so the exclusion process may be a more rapid way to make this adjustment here, but it is not an automatic thing in any stretch.
Alexander, do you have an information or an opinion about that from your side?
Basically, I think that you should take a look on the quota mechanisms, particularly in the European Union, and there is a big category of other suppliers. And please correct me if I was wrong, that unused quotas at the end of the period, they were also redistributed somehow for...
Yeah, but there's only for within the calendar year. So there is a rollover for each quarter.
Oh, okay, so
if at the end of the year, there is a certain quota or share of quota which is unused, it's lost. So, but within every calendar year, every quarter, there is a rollover until the fourth quarter, which is from April to June. That point, there is also the possibility for big exporting countries to use part of the residual quota.
So there are certain mechanisms. So thank you for this clarification. There are certain, of course, not like full scale mechanism, but there are certain adjustment mechanisms already included in EU tariff quotas.
So Larry, when again talking about, let's say, for example, Russian entities in the US, how are they being treated then by?
There's a legal answer and a practical answer to that. The legal answer is it's not a big problem. They had Russian sanctions already. We represent U.S. companies that have Russian companies that have a U.S. legal entity here, and they are not victimized, challenged, or anything else here, but for the sanctions themselves. So if they are shipping capital back to Moscow or the transfer of funds in any way through London or someplace else, that is an issue. The movement of product is an issue. So it's all the normal trade issues would certainly apply here. But in terms of any pejorative sanction here, there's no real legal impediment for the Russian entity here to still continue to exist as the law currently stands. That being said, there's a practical side of this, and there's certainly be discrimination here. If in cities around the United States that have a strong Russian community, I would anticipate there will be protests, there will be backlash. We certainly see that in the States a lot. I have not really heard of that, frankly, as much. As opposed to other nationalities, I get that victimization more. So I think that if I was a Russian national living here, or I lived in a community where there was a large number of Russian speakers or people identified as Russian, that would be a concern. I think it's a much greater support for Ukrainian population. I think the popular media now is decidedly, I think, in favor, with the exception of one ex-president, the country seems to be very much in favor of and supportive of the Ukraine.
Okay, well, thank you so much. One question, I mean, most likely we don't find any way an answer on this. It's too early. So many things are happening simultaneously, and it actually just started last night. So, but one question, and perhaps I might have overlooked that, but Larry, when it comes actually to the perspective of the safeguards in the US and the Biden administration, you mentioned rightfully that not really so much was done except for the 3 million tons that is now permitted to be imported from the European side. But do you see anything? Do you have any perspective that that this is can come to an end, because as we know, the EU safeguards are strongly linked to the US, and that means if there's a perspective that the US safeguards will be or may be terminated, then of course the situation in Europe will also change dramatically very quickly.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to end quickly. I think they're going to die a slow death. But I think they will be moved. We have now a template, and that's encouraging. The situation with the EU was the first template, but in very short order, the US and Japan had reached a similar type of agreement here. I anticipate that those who are doing these negotiations will now use these templates to go everywhere. Certainly our friends in Canada and Mexico will have a benefit of that. I assume Australia will be next. I don't see China getting any break from anything, but I think that the template is there. So I would think that during this year, we'll see a repeat of this type of thing here. I don't see President Biden just ending 232 tariffs automatically. He could have done that already if he felt he wanted to do that. He did not do so. So whether he wants to just keep the revenue that's attributable to this, or the control over the trade, which might be more important. He is a Democratic president, and that may be an issue as well here. So, but I think we'll see more of this. I think the template has started, and we'll see a repeat of this much more frequently in the over the next few months, certainly to the end of this year.
All right, thank you very much, Larry. Fabrizio, then coming actually to your point of view on the safeguards, and you rightfully mentioned that actually the safeguards have become more a political tool with all the further instruments like CBAM, which is also, by the way, is also on the agenda. It's one of the next sessions that we are planning as soon as we have more information on CBAM, how this is going to be structured. So we will have a webinar on this as well. But do you think that becoming more and more political tool, that the EU still will link their procedures or their measures on basis of the US safeguards, or will this become an independent tool?
No, I don't want to be, maybe my previous statement was not clear. No, safeguard is still governed by a strict procedural set of rules, which stems from the WTO safeguard agreement. So safeguard with dumping and subsidy remain part of the classic trade arsenal, which almost every country, jurisdiction in the world has. What I was pointing before is that we are seeing an array, a wide spectrum of additional measures, which are more resting on a unilateral action. So I think Europe is changing its direction. In addition to the traditional trade defense instruments, including safeguard, we are seeing in areas which are not only classical trade areas, but can also, let's say, overlapping competition regulatory, we are seeing more unilateral action like CBAM, like foreign subsidies, like investment arbitration, and so on. And all this is certainly a big challenge for the European and non-European business, because the range of measures to comply and to analyze is increasing dramatically.
Thank you so much, Fabrizio. Thank you so much, Fabrizio. We have a question here out with regards to Australia. Why would Australia require an agreement since they haven't been subject to 232? Larry.
Yeah, I responded to everyone in the chat there. Don's correct, of course. Australia was not subject to it, so that's a bad example. Australia in a different position than EU and Japan, so they would not be subject to this. They wouldn't need this.
All right. Then Typhoon has also raised the question that the new agreements of the US, which takes away the Section 232 from Europe and Japan, what kind of impact this will have on imports?
Well, my perspective, it helps imports. I mean, if you lower the duty, some of that market had been lost, will be back. So I think it's all good news, or at least from the U.S. perspective. So.
Yes, and let's also not forget, because I've read sometimes I also heard from some clients of mine that they were not so impressed by this opening, but the 3.3 million was set on the basis of the historical imports from Europe. So it's a figure which indeed would reinstate the freedom of bilateral trade in steel as it was before March 2018. So it's quite an important opening. Of course, in the meantime, the market has expanded and has boomed. So that figure might not meet the expectations of the European dealers and producers, but it's still an important step towards a more large freedom of business between the two jurisdictions.
So under the bottom line, also when what you explained, Fabrizio, is that was also another remark here, that agreements under the WTO are basically becoming weak and weaker because new agreements are coming into place, new proposals are coming into place. Basically, of course, also with regards to CBAM, or let's say emission reduction proposals, which are definitely relevant for the future of our world. But that means that the meaning of the WTO is becoming lesser and less, and that means that we will have most likely in the future no WTO anymore, which is relevant for the aspects that we are facing, correct?
Well, it's a very important issue, and yes, I mean the WTO is experiencing a crisis. You may know that it's blocked because of the lack of agreement in appointing the members of the appellate body. So now, I mean, that reflects a loss of confidence in the multilateral instruments. So we have been living 20 years of hopes, of ideals, from 95 to 2015. Now, in the last 5-6 years, it's the multilateral arena is suffering a crisis. So there is more and more bilateral, regional, or unilateral actions, and that is what is the striking element, because Europe has always been favoring multilateralism and exchange of agreements. Now we are seeing that the policy, the direction of European trade policy is more to say, okay, these are my rules. These are the rules applicable in Europe. Then, if there is some possible WTO or international violation, we will see this later. But so it's really a change in the direction of the policy.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. This is a very sad time for trade lawyers everywhere. Fabrizio is certainly correct. The WTO is certainly wounded for sure. That's very unfortunate. And I think it goes back farther than 1995. I think it goes back to 1948. I wrote an article which is available about going back to the GATT. 1948 and the agreement we had on tariffs and trade then, and the principles that we certainly U.S., Europe, but other countries around the world aligned themselves into certain agreements to make to avoid mistakes we made in the 1930s and 1940s. And I would say that these agreements the events of the last 48 hours show some of the same mistakes we've made here. Where trade, maybe trade is the answer, but Fabrizio is right. We've certainly, with the exception of the trade facilitation agreement of the WTO, we've really never lived up to WTO goals of a unilateral trade agreement. It is splintered into bilateral and multilateral arrangements as permitted by WTO, and I guess that's a good thing by itself. But we've never really met the goals of GATT, and now I think you got to read the situation in Ukraine and compare that with situation back in the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, if I may, Alexander, just a couple of quick comments. Just to follow up on what Larry just said, the previous comment about the dispute settlement body, or the lack of a functioning dispute settlement body, the incapacity of the DSB is extremely unfortunate, because the ability to settle disputes in a way that has some binding effect, which was very much different from the old GATT system, a great improvement over the old GATT system. The incapacity of the WTO to do that now takes away one of the three legs of the three-legged stool that we always think of with the WTO. So the WTO has a negotiating function, it has a monitoring and compliance function, and of course it has the dispute settlement aspect. You take away that leg and that stool won't last for very long. And I think folks in the international negotiating environment should take this into account very seriously, because with last night's development, the international rules-based system is under serious threat in more ways than one. So the more we lose the ability to settle disputes in a way that people find acceptable is going to be to the detriment of us all, I think. One last point is a note of interest, I hope, to our listeners, is that AMSCI on April 7th will hold an event called SteelCon. Normally we've had this as a live event in Houston. This year we're going to be hosting a virtual event, and the subject is mitigating risk in today's turbulent times. So we have plenty of risk and we have lots of turbulent times. So we will get out information about this seminar, this meeting, a SteelCon meeting for you later. So please stay tuned.
All right, very good. Looking forward to that. Richard, I mean, we as EUROMETAL, that means the European Steel Federation, or Federation actually for steel distributors and traders, we are very proud that we had this meeting today together with you, and I think that it's a good start for future cooperation, because we will have joint subjects, and CBAM, for example, the carbon border mechanism, let's say adjustment mechanism, that is something that you will have in the United States. It's being developed in Europe, and I think it's becoming a global subject. I mean, I know that in the Far East, Southeast Asia, the countries are working on that as well. So I think that we will have some more topics in common in the next month, and we will plan another event on that. And it will be great if all the attendances that who have participated today will be back then. You will get actually the presentations also after that. And if there are any further questions, I think all of the panelists will be open to answer them also directly. From our side, and this is of course addressed to Alexander Sirik, we are all with you and your guys in the Ukraine. I think we were all shocked. We are still shocked, and I hope that our governments and our nations are not only also shocked, but they are also ambitious to help, to support, and to change something. And well, all the best to you and all the best to you folks.
So thank you very much for those warm words. I also hope so too. So we are coming to an end. Well, to everybody who participated, thank you so much for being patient with us. And I hope it gave some value. That's also the meaning of those webinars, to give some value to everybody. And we will repeat that. We will have another one very soon. So stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.